I wasn't expecting it, but at least she had the decency to confront me and not wait until I caught her. I really didn't know what to say. Was I mad? Yes. Was I confused? Yes. Was I going to try and stop her? No way. George, I am not being unreasonable. Go see a lawyer if you feel it is necessary. The only thing that I am asking for is that you continue to pay for the kids' college education. Other than that, I just sat there holding the petition for divorce in my hands. I hadn't opened it or even looked at it. What was the point? Linda had already removed her belongings from the house, and I hadn't even noticed. I wasn't saying anything, but she insisted on chatting away. She did that when she was nervous. She was trying her best to look calm and in control, but the steady stream of words betrayed her. Her words betrayed her. I stared at the papers and smiled to myself. I think she noticed and started talking faster as I stood up. I tossed the envelope on the coffee table. Just get out. I got the message. Goodbye. At least she shut up. She stammered a little as I walked to the kitchen to get a cold beer. Instead of finishing what she was going to say, my wife turned and walked out of the front door. I glanced at the package for the last time 10 minutes later. I was on the second bottle of wine. She'd left it. It was simple and clean. She'd also included a power of attorney so that I could sell the house. We'd just taken out a second mortgage to pay the college tuition for our 2 sons, Robert and Glenn. If I sold the house now, I wouldn't even make enough profit to pay for the realtor's commission. So what was it that brought 20 years of marriage to a screeching halt? It seems that Linda had a bit of a thing for Cameron Wright. Linda and Cameron were a steady couple for years before I even met her. She mentioned him often in the past, and a few of our mutual friends made comments about him over the years. I ignored it, thinking he was just an old boyfriend. Now I know that there was more to it. After a while, I noticed that the room was getting dark. I knocked over 3 empty glasses as I reached over to turn on the lamp on the end table. Then the doorbell rang. Oh, no. What now? I was talking to myself. George, I just found out what she did. Billy said I should come over and see if you were okay. It was Linda's sister, Grace. I always liked Grace. In fact, I liked her better than I liked Linda. I must have had a few too many and wasn't thinking straight. Billy was my best friend, so I shouldn't have even considered his wife in that way. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. Grace took me by the arm and led me out to the kitchen. I resisted, feeling like she was treating me like an invalid. I didn't need any help. The fluorescent lighting was hurting my eyes, but I just squinted it away. I had to think for a second to remember how many beers I'd had. I'd drunk about half the coffee before I realized that Grace wasn't saying anything. I felt better now. George, can we talk now? Give me a minute. I had to go to the toilet by the time I got back, and she'd topped off the cup. So, Grace, tell me about my loving wife and Cameron Wright. When did this all come about? Your stupid brother and George, I just found out about it this afternoon. Don't be too hard on yourself. I always thought that she was still interested in him even after you guys got married. It would have been nice if you would have said something 20 years ago. Get real. There was no way that I was going to stick my nose into that. I was just hoping that over the years she would forget about him. The two of you seemed to get along so well. Grace, it was never as good as it looked. I've come to see that, for the most part, the relationship was more platonic than romantic. I tried and tried over the years, but I could never really warm her up. Flowers, candy, and jewelry never worked. We got along in all respects, and we rarely had an argument. I think I understand why now. You covered it up pretty well, Zinnia, Grace, Attila. Thanks. Can I have a few of those oatmeal cookies in the canister behind you? My stomach is screaming for something, so tell me, sister. And I'd love to know what motivated my wife to dump me. You remember Cameron, right? He dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force right after that. You and Linda started dating, and Cameron was Linda's first. I nodded and shrugged at the same time. A girl never forgets her first love, after all. She was really pissed when he left. She wanted a family and kids. I guess you were the one who she. I helped her with that. I thought she made a good choice. I had no idea she was just using you until he got back. I don't think she even knew he was coming back, so why is he back now? I asked him. He finished 20 years in the Air Force and retired with the rank of major. Linda says he has a nice pension and several good executive positions lined up in the area to start his second career. She was telling me about this and seemed proud. She was really excited about his military career, as if she'd been part of it. To be honest, George, it seemed a bit strange, so I assume she's now living with him. I asked, and he's renting a condo in Berkshire Heights until he can find a suitable home to buy in the area. Linda is now completely moved in with him. How long has she been there? I asked how long he'd been back. I'm not sure, but I think it's been about 3 weeks. He called her as soon as he got into town, so that means George has been away for that long. I asked, and it looks that way. Sorry, Grace tried to fill my coffee cup again, but I motioned her away. I don't need any more coffee. All I want now is a shower and a good night's sleep. Thanks for stopping by, Grace. Lock up, and when you leave, tell my sister. And as I walked out of the room, I could tell that the lawyer was sad. I was glad that the boys were no longer at home. It would have been awkward for me to explain what happened to them. They would find out eventually, but I was hoping that I would have recovered my composure by then. I didn't want to look pathetic. My career choice wasn't that ambitious, but I enjoyed my work. I was in charge of the produce section at one of the larger supermarkets in the area. The company had been trying to get me to take a manager's position. I'd been in the same position for the last 10 years, but I wasn't keen on the long hours and the heavy responsibility. I decided it was time for a change. The next morning, I gave my district supervisor a call to let him know I was ready to move up. That afternoon, I was assigned to take over a new store just 10 minutes from home. I spent 3 days training in Baltimore and then started my new job in my spare time. I let the boys know about the change in my marital status, put the house up for sale and rearranged all of my credit card and banking accounts. Linda's car was in her name, but the insurance was under my policy. I was really busy getting a new store up and running. I didn't mind because it kept me from thinking about my personal problems. The company had things pretty streamlined, so most of the difficulties that I had were easily resolved. The corporate team had a few professional store openers stay with us for the first 2 weeks, which was a big help. They handled the training for most of the new store employees. Half of the people were I was happy to have the support of experienced colleagues who had transferred in from other stores in the area. I was confident in my ability to complete the task and, before I knew it, things had settled down. Everything was under control and running smoothly, so I had time to start arranging my personal affairs. I was planning on getting a small apartment near the store, so I started to get rid of everything at the house that I would no longer need. I gave away most of it, and there were several agencies in the area that were willing to take almost anything. The first thing to go was the marital bed. I got a lot of satisfaction out of disposing of the wedding pictures and the family photos. I kept a small collection of pictures of the boys. Billy called and insisted that I come over to the house the next Sunday for a cookout. He promised me that Linda would not be there. He also wanted to bring me up to date on the status of Cameron Wright, a local war hero. It wasn't much of a cookout. Billy and Grace's 2 teenage daughters made an appearance, but they quickly disappeared. Basically, it was just an opportunity for Billy and me to chat. Grace spent most of the afternoon keeping us supplied with beer and cleaning up after Billy's cooking. Billy, what do you know about Major Wright? All I know is that he's spreading around the Veterans of Foreign Wars Hall. Cameron and Linda have been coming in a couple of times a week. He's all grandstanding and glad-handing. The guys seem to eat it up, but I think they're just impressed because it's new blood. Most of the guys that come in there are over 60. What is my wife doing while he is crowing about Linda? She usually just stands beside him and smiles. She seems proud to be with him. She never acted that way when we were out together. George, you ain't no big war hero. Billy couldn't help laughing when he said it, but I didn't find it funny. He wears a baseball cap with that major insignia embroidered on the front of it. Is he even wearing a tag on the front of his car with that gold oak leaf? He is doing his best. He was trying to impress everyone by acting like he was a ranking officer. I had a feeling that something wasn't right about Major Wright. I finished my beer just as Grace arrived with a couple of fresh ones. Billy Cameron never even finished high school. How did he get to be an officer? As I remember, they got rid of the old Mustang program years ago to get a commission. Nowadays, you have to have a degree. How did that guy get a college degree when he wasn't even smart enough to get a high school diploma? I agree, a diploma is a good point. I don't have an answer, though. Did he actually join the VFW? Yes, he joined the first week he was back. Can you get a copy of his application for membership? No problem. I just want to check a few things out. I'll have it for you next week. Well, about this time, Grace came out and told us to lighten up the conversation so she could be included. I don't remember what we ended up talking about, but a few hours later, I went home with a devious smile on my face. Things were going well at first. The following week, I started the paperwork for the divorce. I had 3 serious people looking at the house, and the realtor was optimistic. Everything was running smoothly at work until Thursday, when I arrived at my office to find Maria Sanchez waiting for me. Maria was the supervisor on my midnight to 8 stocking crew. She was promoted and transferred to the new store from across town. All I knew about her was that she was a hard worker. Everyone agreed that she was. She deserved the promotion and the raise that came with it. If I lost Maria, I'd have a small problem on my hands that I didn't want to deal with. Getting people to work the graveyard shift is difficult, and getting good ones was nearly impossible. I hope you're not here to complain about something, Mrs. Sanchez. She smiled but seemed a little nervous. Not a complaint, Mr. Templeton, but I need some help. Go ahead. I'll do what I can. I have 2 sons, aged 15 and 16. They both have part-time jobs after school. After school, they have to get to their jobs on time because they have a school bus to catch at 7 a.m. But they're struggling sometimes. When I get home at 8, they're still in bed. They're not lazy, just tired. I need to get them going in the morning. You know what I mean? You want to stop them working so that they don't have to. They work to get their college money. They both do well in school, but I have to get them there. What can I do to help? I said I found it interesting that she wasn't whiny. This was a no. That's nonsense. She ran a tight operation, but she was having a problem with her own kids. I snickered a little at the situation and was rewarded with a sharp retort. It's not funny, Mr. Templeton. If you can't come up with some way to help me, I'll just have to find another job. Mrs. Sanchez, you supervise a group of people at night. You know how it is with young people. They'd take every chance to screw off if they could, but they don't because they work for you. You wouldn't put up with it. How is it that you let 2 young boys take you in a good position here? Where's their father when all of this is going on? I really annoyed her. She got up with fire in her eyes for a second. I was afraid that I might have lost her. You're an arrogant bastard, Mr. Templeton. Everyone said that you were smart and fair. It looks like they were wrong. I didn't come here to be insulted. Calm down and sit down. I have a possible solution. She sat back down but did not look too happy about it. I am going to change your working shift. You will start at 11. That should give you enough time to get your inventory lineup ready for the night crew, who arrive at 12. You'll be working until 6 o'clock. When the first of the day shift supervisors arrives at 11 o'clock, he'll take over the tail end of your shift. You'll get to leave in plenty of time to get your kids off to school and maybe even make breakfast. That's a good thing, except for one little problem. I need at least 38 scheduled hours. I need to keep my health insurance, so I can't afford to lose it. She was right, but I wasn't done yet. Do you go to church, Mrs. Sanchez? Oh, Come on. You really know how to wind me up. What on earth does my church attendance habits have to do with my job? You're very attractive, though. Headed, Mrs. Sanchez. I'd appreciate it if you'd calm down a little until I'm done and stop calling me Mrs. Sanchez. I'm not married. I guess you have a smart remark to say about that too. I was starting to get exasperated with the woman. I sighed, leaned back in my chair, and immediately fell over backward for a moment. I was just looking at the ceiling. I was amazed at how cheap the light fixtures looked. I heard her giggle as she looked over the top of my desk. I was lying on my back like a little frog, and she was softly laughing at me. Her hand went to her mouth to cover up her smile. Sorry, she muttered. I was embarrassed at my clumsiness, and she was amused at it. It was difficult to compose myself as I got resettled. If I can't call you Mrs. Sanchez, what do I call you? Maria, just Maria, Maria. I have 2 supervisors who are both Southern Baptists. Neither one of them will work on Sunday mornings, so I end up having to. From 10 to noon on Sunday, that'll get you the extra hours, but that's not important anyway. It's important to me, she replied. You pay extra for the family plan, health insurance, is that right? Yes, for $80 a month, both of my boys are also covered. Maria, I'm going to make you salaried. That means that your boys, it means that your insurance will cover your family, and you'll get a small raise. I won't be eligible for overtime, though. Is that right? She didn't say anything for a few moments. She was a striking woman. Her hair was dark, but not quite black. Her eyes, however, were she had black hair and looked a little gaunt, with no visible fat. I was trying to determine what type of figure she had hidden beneath her work clothes when she responded, Okay, I'll take it, but I don't know anything about being a supervisor during the day. I never had to work. Don't worry about dealing with customers. I'll work the first 4 shifts with you. There's no way you can mess it up. That was the start of my relationship with Maria Sanchez. It was pretty stressful, and at the time, I never thought it would become serious. I thought she'd just stick around for a few hours. She was supposed to leave at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning, but we ended up working until late that evening. She wanted to know everything she was going to be responsible for, and I didn't have anything better to do, so I enjoyed her company. The Sunday paper had a small article about a fundraiser at the local American Legion post. Major Cameron Wright had his picture taken in full uniform standing with my wife. I can honestly say that I had never seen her looking as proud as she did in that photo. You would have thought she herself had earned the damn medals. I didn't get back to Billy until Monday evening. Grace had called me. At work, she asked me to come over for spaghetti. How could I say no? Billy had a copy of Cameron's application to join the VFW and also a copy of his discharge papers. I told him about the picture in the Sunday paper and he promised to get me the forms from the American Legion post. Grace had overheard. At the beauty salon, Linda and I tried to join the Liberty Keys Country Club once, but we were turned down. I didn't mind, but Linda was disappointed. Grace said Cameron's application was pretty much pre-approved. It was a slow week. I had already found I had a small apartment and usually went straight there after work and finished at least 3 beers, sometimes more. The rent included basic cable, so I wasn't completely bored. Next week, I'll have my DSL internet connection. The week ended on a high note when I found an invitation on my desk for supper with Maria and her 2 sons. I already had her address and phone number, but she gave it to me anyway. It felt a bit awkward and could easily be seen as a breach of the company's fraternization policy. I decided to run it by my boss in Baltimore and get his blessing in advance. That seemed to help. I bought a bottle of wine to take along, but I had no idea what to bring for the boys. I was a little anxious about meeting Maria's sons, but after they found out that I had 2 sons who were already in college, the evening got a lot better. Poor Maria found her sons being left out of most of the conversations. I tried to include her in the conversation a few times, but she gave me a little grimace like she didn't want me to worry. She seemed happy that I got along with Armin and Martin. The night ended all too quickly, and we never got to open the wine that Sunday. I spent about 2 hours with Maria. Maria was starting her first real shift as a supervisor, and I got the feeling she was anxious to see me go so she could fly solo. I thought that was a good sign. She promised to call me if she had any problems, and she also asked me to come by for supper that evening. Armin and Martin mysteriously disappeared after supper, leaving Maria and me alone. I helped her clean up the dinner dishes, and we finally got to open up that bottle of wine. The conversation was awkward at first, with the exception of supper on Friday. Everything between Maria and me had been strictly on a professional level. She seemed a little dejected when I told her that our relationship could cause problems, but she quickly mentioned that she felt confident that it was a minor thing that I would have no difficulty solving. I didn't bring it up, but I think Maria felt the need to explain her marital status. She had been living with the boy's father in Tucson, and one day he just disappeared. She stayed there for 3 years, but he never returned. Her brother was working in the Philadelphia area as a bricklayer, and he convinced her to move in with him and his family. Eventually, she got a place of her own and has been working ever since. Since she'd never married to make things better for the boys, I finished my tale of marital woe just as the wine bottle was empty. Even though the conversational subject was a bit of a downer, I still enjoyed my time with Maria. We'd stretched the evening out over several hours, so the wine consumption wasn't a problem. When it came time for me to drive home, things were pretty normal for several days, both at work and in my private life. Billy came to see me one evening with the information from the American Legion Post. We finished a few beers and tried to figure out what to do now that we had all the background stuff. A few beers turned into a few too many, and Grace ended up coming over to pick up her drunk husband. I was late for work the next morning, but nobody complained since I was the boss. Friday morning brought another unexpected surprise. 3 of the company vice presidents showed up. They made a quick tour of the store, but it all seemed a little fake. Everything became much clearer when we took a break for lunch. Apparently, there was a severe shortage of supermarket managers. At least, that's what it seemed like to me. By the end of the meal, I had been offered a position as I was made regional supervisor, in charge of 6 stores within a 30-mile radius. The salary and benefits were more than I could have ever imagined. Of course, I made my second-in-command at the present store an offer too, and he was pleased to accept. I left. I gave him one piece of advice: don't mess with Maria. He winked at me and I smiled, showing that we were on the same page. Maria was naturally unhappy to see me leave the store, but pleased that I got the promotion. I took her out for a nice supper, which I guess you could say was our first real date. The boys were I was really happy to give us the night out together. It was also the first time that I got to see her dressed up and looking her best. She was absolutely stunning. She seemed to take my promotion a little better when I told her that I would still be working and living in the immediate area. On the other hand, she was not pleased to hear I had to go to Baltimore for 2 weeks of training. I had lunch with Billy and Grace on Sunday. We celebrated my good fortune, and I tried not to drink too much. I planned to drive to Maryland that evening so I'd be fresh for my first day of training. Billy wanted to know what I had. I told him I'd get back to him about Common and Linda once I'd finished my training and got settled into my new role. Maria and I spoke on the phone every day, sometimes twice. I felt like a teenager. She asked me all about the training, and I asked her what was going on at her end. I always asked her about the boys, and she seemed to appreciate that I'd shown interest in them. My new job came with a lot of responsibilities I hadn't anticipated. Community involvement was important, and I was expected to join as many civic and social organizations as possible, including the local country club. I was pleased to be told that my position with the company would guarantee me acceptance just about anywhere I applied. Life was good. I went home the first weekend and saw Maria twice. I got my first kiss, but I felt a little uncomfortable since I was technically still married. She asked me about it. She was a little uncertain about the kiss and laughed at my explanation. She was teasing me a little and I think she enjoyed it. I know I did. The company rented a small office in one of the local business complexes and had it fully set up, including a secretary. They had done this before and it showed I was ready. I started my full operation on the first day, with my application for full membership at the Liberty Keys Country Club. All I had to do was sign it and pick up my membership card. I decided that would be the first order of business. I was driving my new company car in my new suit. I was feeling great as I walked into the club lobby until I saw Linda. She was standing with a few other ladies, dressed in a cute little tennis outfit. I didn't even know that she played tennis. All of a sudden, I felt hurt and humiliated by what she had done to me. I lost my confidence and self. I tried to walk past the group without drawing attention to myself. It worked until I heard one of the ladies say, "Is that your husband who just walked in?" I didn't turn around. There was a bit of mumbling as I handed the attendant my application form. He disappeared into a back room as I stood waiting for something unpleasant to happen. I knew it was coming. It would have been nice to have a clever quip prepared, but my mind was blank. "George, what are you not supposed to be here? This is for members only. You know you're not going to try to join again, are you?" I really wanted to embarrass her in front of her new friends, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. "Hello, Linda. You look well. Nice outfit? Is it new? I didn't know you played tennis." I was babbling. I wanted to be clever and witty, but I just couldn't. The string of stupid statements was a good indication of how nervous I was. In itself, that was embarrassing. "I'm taking George. I've always wanted to play tennis, but it's always been too expensive." I could only smile and wish I could join in. "George, this is really uncomfortable for me. It's members only." You know, I was still smiling as the attendant returned to the counter. "Here you are, Mr. Templeton. Your membership card, locker key, and a copy of the club rules and regulations. Welcome to Liberty Keys County Club, sir." I nodded a silent thank you to him and turned to walk away. Linda was standing. She was looking confused, so I just grinned and walked back through the club lobby. I wanted to turn around and see what she was doing, but I resisted the urge. I smiled all the way back to the office. I took Maria to Red Lobster for dinner that evening. I wasn't trying to gloat, but I got a kick out of telling her about my meeting with Linda earlier. There was no wine with the meal because my guest had to be at work by 11. We had a few little chuckles about that situation. Maria said she'd join me at the club for lunch on Sunday after she finished her shift. I was hoping we'd bump into Cameron and Linda. The rest of the week went smoothly until Friday. Helen, my new secretary, was grinning as I walked into the office. My desk was there, as was the local newspaper. The front page showed a picture of Cameron Wright in handcuffs being put into a plain black car. He hadn't realized that the American Legion Post's check on he'd applied to join the club, and it was up to us to make sure he didn't get in. Turns out, he'd retired from the Air Force, but he'd only been a technical sergeant, not a major. The fact that he wore medals he'd never been awarded was going to cause him more grief. They called it stolen valor. It was not taken lightly. I had a strange feeling that Cameron Wright was going to rapidly lose face in his own hometown. Helen brought me a cup of coffee and told me that it was okay to smile. That did get her angry again about an hour later. I got a call from the realtor informing me that the house had been sold and the closing was scheduled in 2 weeks. Just when I thought things couldn't get any better, my final divorce papers arrived in the mail. It turned out that good old Cameron had pulled some strings with some of his new friends and got the paperwork pushed through quicker than normal. I didn't think they were friends anymore. The day and the week were coming to a good end. Billy stopped by to see my new office, but what he really wanted was to tell me that Linda had moved in with him and Grace. He hadn't been home yet, so the only information he had was what he got the news from Grace when she called him. He wasn't happy about his new house guest, but he was pleased about what had happened. Billy didn't put up a fight when I took him down to the local pub to celebrate. As long as I was buying, I called Maria at home before I left for work and gave her the good news in full. I think she was as happy as I was. Billy came and got me out of bed on Saturday. He was able to hold his liquor better than I was. We went to Shoney for the breakfast buffet and some coffee as we ate. I got an update on my ex Linda's car had been repossessed. It seems that Cameron was happy to make the payments for her, but the checks were worthless. She didn't even know until they came and got it. Apparently, he took care of everything else the same way. I don't know how long he was expecting to get away with it, but he sure did fool a lot of people before he got caught. Grace told Linda that she could stay for 1 week. Linda didn't know where she was going or what she was going to do. She also didn't have any money left after leaving her marriage. Maria was asleep in bed by this time, but Armin and Martin were ready to try out the Liberty Keys golf course. Maria was up when we got back to the house and gave us a lecture about having fun without her. We ordered pizza and got a pay please. View movie. Life was good. Maria and I had a pleasant brunch at the county club on Sunday morning. I was hoping to show her off in front of Linda and Cameron, but they never showed up. There were a few glances our way and I noticed a few comments being made, but overall things were great. It was the first of many brunches to come. Linda moved out of Billy and Grace's house before the end of the week to a small furnished apartment. Grace and Linda kept in touch, but they weren't as close as they had been, even though they were sisters. Robert and Glenn came home for our wedding 3 months later. They gave me a bit of a tease about having to go out and get 2 new guys to replace them. The 4 boys were. It was a relief to see things go smoothly, and Maria and I were both happy about that. Robert and Glenn never mentioned Linda, and I didn't deliberately avoid talking about her, but it just never seemed to come up. I'm not sure if they stopped to see her before they went back to school or not. Billy was my best man, but he was more of a witness than anything else since it was just a civil ceremony. Maria stopped working before the wedding. I also asked Armin and Martin to quit so they could focus on their studies. They didn't mind, even though I didn't make any money from selling the old house. I was still able to buy a new one with no problem. 2 months after the wedding, Maria and I were Christmas shopping at Target when we saw Linda was working at the customer service desk at the front of the store, wearing the Target uniform, khaki trousers and a red shirt. She looked as if she'd lost weight. She noticed us looking at her and turned and went into the office behind the counter. We didn't mean to embarrass her. Maria and I left the store and did our shopping elsewhere from then on. Cameron Wright just disappeared after he was arrested and charged. They just took him away and we never heard anything about him again. Robert and Glenn came home for Christmas at the new house. The big holiday surprise came when Linda arrived. Maria had invited. I was pretty annoyed at first, but then I realized that Maria had made a very gracious and daring move. It was necessary for us all to have closure. I never forgave Linda for what she did, but just knowing that she was aware of what she lost made it better. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.